This is a special episode of Joey's Scarf. It's day 5 of December 2021. And this day, 10 years ago, my son Joe passed away from colon cancer. Joey's Scarf, my podcast, is named after Joe in memory of him. And the story behind Joey's scarf, I knit the scarf for Joe. And I was working on it actually sometimes when he would be having his chemo treatment. I would be sitting there knitting and he would be sitting on his iPad watching a skit from Conan O'Brien or The Family Guy or one of his favorite shows, and he would be smiling, and it was quiet time. Me knitting, and he with a little smile on his face. And that's the story of how the podcast came to be named. And I have a vivid memory of Joe wearing the scarf, and I just remember him, just having it casually draped over his shoulders, and he looked so cool in it. So today, this December 5th, is this episode is going to be some tributes to Joe, some feelings I've had over the years on this December 5th day. And I'm going to be doing some readings from my blog, which is Linda Grace, an hour away. And that's going to be the episode for today. I'm going to save the Vlogmas stuff for tomorrow. And this is going to be Joe's day. I just want to say thank you if you're so inclined to listen, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I wrote this on December 5th, 2015, and it's titled, "It's Okay, Joe." My son Joe passed away 4 years ago today. As I always do on this day, I find my way into the darkened space of my heart. It is where my pain and anger has burrowed in. It is deep and cleverly hidden most of the time, but not today. Today I find it, grab hold of it, and pull it out. Yesterday was the 4-year anniversary of Joe's last day here with us. I have flashing visual memories of that day. I recall those of us who loved Joe wandering in and out of the room where he would find his final rest. Or perhaps it was me. Yes, it was me. I was the wanderer. My memories of that day are surreal. I feel confused. What is going on? I don't understand what's happening. I want to pick him up and carry him away from that room. I want to take him away from death. I close my eyes and I hear the day. The football game is playing on the TV in the room where Joe lay, unconscious. It's loud. Unconsciously, I find myself putting my hands over my ears. It should be quiet. Joe was quiet. The hospice nurse was sitting on the other bed in the room, right next to Joe. She told me to talk to him. "He can hear you," she said. I was irrationally puzzled. How can he hear me? It's so loud in here. But I tell him, "It's okay, Joe. It's okay." I'm not sure what I meant by that. It's what a mother says, It's what a mother says. This one day is the day of my son's death. There's no joy in this day. But this day, this death day, was not the life of Joe. Tomorrow I will remember the beautiful life that was my Joe. In memory of my son Joey, this day, this 5th December day. I knew his life before anyone else, almost from the first minute, before it was evident to anyone else, so I'd find myself placing my hand on my flat stomach, and I could feel the warmth of him. Before it was evident to anyone else, I felt his life, quiet, fluttering butterfly feelings. When it became evident to the rest, only I could feel his heaviness, one arm under, one on top, soothing him as he turned and kicked. He came quietly into the world, not in the middle of the night, but at a most considerate 2:00 p.m. time of the day, and my arms were his first cradle. The memories of the time of only he and me are vividly clear, while at the same time gently calming. Then the memories of the days after he wriggled out of my arms and climbed down from my lap are fleeting. They seem to be hidden from me, only coaxed out by old photos and videos or by hearing stories from others. I suppose the passing of time and the stuff of life have cluttered up those spaces in my mind. I knew him, though. I knew him so well, because he and we had a bond, you see, as only a mother and son can. Today, as I recall that day, that December 5th day of only a short time ago, I am overwhelmed with painful and sad memories, but they are painful only because they are of that day. This poignant message from the Testament of Mary reveal my feelings so well on this December day, this 5th day. Quote, "He lifted his head for a moment, and his eyes caught mine. He was the boy I had given birth to, and he was more defenseless now than he had been then. And in those days after he was born, when I held him and watched him, my thoughts included the thought that I would have someone now to watch over me when I was dying. I would have cried out as I cried out that day, and the cry would have come from a part of me that is the core of me. The rest of me is merely flesh and bone." Yes, the core, close quote. Yes, the core of me is where he lives, and I will never say goodbye. He was only passing by. I wonder what today would be like if someone had whispered a secret in my ear on April 4th, 1975. "Here's your little boy. Hold on to him tightly. He is precious and yours to keep for 34 years. Perhaps today I would be able to feel the weight of his nearly 8 pounds when he was placed in my arms for the first time. I might vividly sense a tickle as I recall the movement of his head from side to side on my bare chest. I'm sure his newborn smell would continue to linger and cling to me. I would still taste the richness of the chocolate frosting on my fingers as I wiped it off his 1-year-old face. Instead of a frozen moment captured in a photographic glimpse, the memories of his milestones, his first, would be an instant recall, brought about at my will. Today, in my mind, the in-betweens would not be measured in years, but in moments, each one. If someone had whispered a secret in my ear on April 4th, 1975, I would have looked up when he called Mommy, look at me, not for the 4th or 5th time he called, but the very first time. I would have always known who he was, what he liked, how he felt, not just in the last ones of his years, but in each and every moment of all of those 34 years. Today, this December 5th, I long for my son. I want to hear his voice. I want to touch his hand. I want to especially see his shy smile. I want to talk to him. I want to listen to him. I wish, I regret, I realize that if I had known the secret, I would have treasured each minute of every one of his 13,393 days. One of my favorite books, because it is told from the point of view of a mother who has lost her son, is The Testament of Mary by Colm Tobin. This quote describes how I feel most every day, but especially this day. Quote, "But no one realized that it would be the realm of death he was destined for. That all the grace and beauty of his aura of specialness, like a gift from the gods to his parents and his siblings, that all of it was a grim joke, like being teased by the smell of delicious food or the possibility of plenty, when it was only something passing by, destined for elsewhere." I wrote this one December 5th, 2017. It's called 6 Years Ago, sometime in October. 6 years ago, sometime in October, someone had an idea that there should be a family photo. There seemed to be a frantic urgency about it. I don't remember whose idea it was, but I do have memories of the assigned day, picture day. We were to meet in the park. The ground was covered with leaves that crackled and rustled as I scuffed through, kicking them aside, making a path for myself, waving to the others, hurrying to get to them. The young kids were excited. Why wouldn't they be? They were set free in a wide open space with bright Crayola-colored things they could climb up, hang upside down from, swing high, and slide down. They could use their outside voices to call one another. Over here, come over here. Mommy, Daddy, Grandma, Pop, look at me. The youngest one, honing his newly acquired walking upright skills, was happily exploring. One of us always close behind him, sometimes having a hard time keeping his pace. I remember the photographer was late. The daylight started to fade, bringing with it the end of day chill. The adults were getting impatient. I suppose at that point, so were the kids. Joe was tired. He said he was cold. I could see that. Why don't you sit in the car and rest, we said. The photographer sent a text apologizing, but promised she was on her way. Why don't you go sit with Joe for a while, Ross said. Joe was listening to a game. I don't remember if it was end-of-season baseball or start-of-season football. I remember thinking how the noise of the radio was drowned out by the silence inside of the car. I can picture the two of us sitting side by side, the windows rolled up. I remember looking out the front window, watching the others, as if I were watching a movie with no sound. The kids were laughing and chasing each other. The adults were talking or looking at their phones. They would often turn their heads towards the parking lot as a car pulled in, hoping, I suppose, that it would be the photographer. Every once in a while I would glance over at Joe. He did look tired, so tired. I still remember what we talked about, so silly what I was telling him. But now that I think about it, it wasn't silly at all. It was family stuff. I guess you could call it gossip. It was the weather. It's getting cold out, right? I wanted to tell him so many things that were hard to say. I guess too hard to say. Today, for some reason, the memory of that day came to mind. The first thought as I roused out of sleep, in fact, was of that day. I used to have regrets about that October family picture day, for it was the last time the two of us were alone together. Why didn't I say those too hard to say things? Why was I chatting about nonsensical things? Today, as I write about that day, though, I began to realize what I was doing. I wanted things to be normal, you know? I wanted to talk about the weather and family gossip and whether his favorite team was going to pull this one out. I wanted him to know that we would have more time, much more time to say the hard to say things. No, we didn't have to say those things on this day, this family picture day. You might imagine that I would say to you something like, say the hard to say things, because you never know if you will get another chance. But I'm not going to do that, simply because I feel that the people you love and those who love you, that sometimes it's okay to just sit side by side and be. As it turned out, Joe couldn't wait any longer for the photographer. He was tired, so tired. Anne took him home and then came back for the family photo. So even though you might not see Joe in that 6 years ago October family picture, I can see him so clearly, sitting side by side of each one of us. This is my Joey. Who was this mysterious man who was known to us as Joseph, Joe, Joey, Bro, Uncle Joe, or Hun? From the time he was a little boy, I figured out how to read Joe. I learned what each subtle body movement meant. His facial expressions were actually quite loud. Sometimes his eyes alone would tell a whole story. His teachers would say to me, "Joseph is a good student, but he is so quiet." As he got older and moved on to adulthood, I lost touch with little things about Joe. What music he liked, what clothes he chose to wear, what songs he liked to play on his guitar, where he was on the weekend, or who he spent evenings with. I never lost touch, though, with the silent communication we shared, his eyes, his smile, or a little shrug of his shoulders. Each meant something particularly special to me. Because he was so quiet, very often Joe would get teased. "Keep it down, Joe. You're talking so much that none of us can get a word in edgewise." Joe would turn red, but he would always smile. It seemed as though some people would be uncomfortable around him. "He doesn't talk much," they would say. Many of the people in his life knew only small bits and tiny pieces of him. "He is so quiet," they would say. "What is he thinking? How does he feel? He is so quiet." Oh yes, we all knew that Joe was a Mets fan. I know that when everyone in the stands was yelling, "Let's go Mets, let's go Mets," Joe was quietly yelling it too. His laugh may have been quiet, but his sense of humor was obvious. I'm sure if you listened closely, you would know that inside he was laughing loudly at a silly Conan skit. What was there about Uncle Joe that Bella, Kenny, Ryan, Tyler would hear that perhaps others couldn't? I'm sure they never said, "But he is so quiet." I suppose there may have been some little specific things that I didn't know about Joe, but when I reflect on my son, I understand that I knew the most important things about him. I knew what a gentle person he was. I understood his off-kilter sense of humor. I knew that he loved little children and puppies and that they loved him. I knew he would always go back for seconds when I served my famous lasagna. I knew that Domani was the light of his life. I knew he was a good father. I knew that it was meant to be for he and Anne to find each other again. I knew that he loved his wife. I knew that he was strong and that his strength ran deep. During the last weeks of his life, I knew that there were times when he must have been very frightened, but he never gave up the fight. I knew that he would never willingly leave his family. Just a few days before he died, he smiled and said to me, "We still have time." He knew that I loved him. The last time he spoke to me, he mouthed the words, "I love you." Quiet people are sometimes misunderstood. Take the time to get to know a quiet person. After all, you might be lucky enough to discover the treasures of their mind, heart, and soul, just like my strong, lovable, wonderful, quiet Joe.